just making sure about the adult alone page. You got it? Shira Chadasha Shihu Geuli. Unfortunately for you, that's the morning we come up with. So it will not help you this evening. You girls okay here?
Let's go.
Okay, Dylan? Yeah? Okay.
I believe it's on page 11. You'll find the words to Ki Eshmera Shabbat. This is a melody that comes to us from Baghdad, supposedly very old. The text, Ibn Ezra, from the 12th century. Ki Eshmera Shabbat El Yishmereni Ki Eshmera Shabbat El Yishmereni Oti Leonia Ein Hoveni Oti Leonia Ein Hoveni Ki Eshmera Shabbat El Yishmereni Ki Eshmera Shabbat El Yishmereni Oti Leonead Ein Hoveni Oti Leonead Ein Hoveni Ki Eshmera Shabbat El Yishmereni Ki Eshmera Shabbat El Yishmereni.
Although that prayer and sentiment are centuries old, it reminds me of the saying of Echad Ha'am from the 19th or early 20th centuries when he said that more than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. It's very special in our frantic society to set aside time for the peace and quiet of Shabbat. I was speaking about Shabbat observance with the confirmation class this past Sunday, and we were listening how different families observe Shabbat. And actually, I was surprised when two of the students said that in their family they tried to hold off on using their electronic devices for most of the Sabbath, not necessarily for all of the Sabbath, but just turning off their phones with other electronic devices. And I asked them, well, how do you like that? They said it's not easy to even go a few hours without that, but they said it adds a special quality to that day. And several of the other students mentioned that it's probably the one day of the week when they try to have a family dinner all together. Now, some families do try to have a dinner at a set time every night, but that's become harder and harder. And so for many of these families, this is the one time, Shabbat dinner, when they are all together, at least for the dinner, before they may go out in different directions. I know what that's like, having raised 3 kids myself, for something like that. It's all part of the beauty of the Shabbat, and we continue with our welcome of Shabbat with Lecha Dodi on page 20.
לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד ישמיענו אל המיוחד אולי אחד ושמו אחד לשם תפארת ולתחילה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכוון אליך כי היא מקור הברכה בראש מקרן נסוכה סוף מעשה במקשבה תקילה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה התעוררי כי בעורר קומי אורי שירה ברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה.
Rise and face the entrance to the synagogue.
Holy shalom atertala, am besimcha uvtzola tokemone am segula, boi chala, boi chala. דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה.
We remain standing for our call to worship, but I did want to ask who the composer is for that setting.
Oh, yes, Moroccan. Forgive me. Aaron Ben Susan, I believe, is the way you pronounce it.
Well, they're very interesting. It also struck me as Sephardic. You can kind of hear the Sephardic. It tends to be, I guess, more in a major key and a little bit more upbeat than Ashkenazic, Eastern European, which is often in a minor key. And yes. We continue with the Baruch Hu on page 28. Please be seated. Continue with the blessing of the Ma'ariv Aravim on page 30.
Baruch atah Adonai, speak the evening into being. B'chokhmah poteach she'arim, as you turn the seasons round. Machalif et hazmanim, let the stars keep watch above us. Baraki akir tzono, for the day and night are yours. Oreyo v'alayla, oreyo v'alayla, golem or mitnei choshech, v'choshech mitnei or. Oreyo v'alayla, oreyo v'alayla, golem or mitnei choshech, v'choshech mitnei or. Mavir yom u'mevi layla, crossing over into darkness. Mavtil ben yom u'mevi layla, drying lines within the light. Adonai tziva'ot shelo, God, living and enduring. Tamid yimloch aleinu, forever and beyond. Borei yom v'alayla, borei yom v'alayla, golem or mitnei choshech, v'choshech mitnei or. Borei yom v'alayla, borei yom v'alayla, golem or mitnei choshech, v'choshech mitnei or. Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Haravim.
Ahavat Olam, page 32.
Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta, otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shokmeinu, kumenu nasiach b'chukecha, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, נגי יומם ולילה.
After those two beautiful melodies representing the two prayers before the Shema. We now join in the Shema in the V'ahavta, page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai
Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod, Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ata et Adonai Elohecha bechol levacha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher Anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשיתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
When the Cantor was singing a few moments ago, Borei Yom V'Laila, creating day and creating night, and that was a refrain, I couldn't help but think, feeling so blessed that now almost every day I'm able to see, Debbie and I, magnificent sunrise over water and sunset over water. And in addition to that, the abundant bird life and waterfowl life is most active on the lake in the early morning. And so yesterday morning, we know that if there's a lot of beautiful ducks swimming and gulls and other things, that will attract the attention of an even bigger bird that for many of us growing up we didn't see because it almost went extinct. It happens to be our national symbol, the American bald eagle, and yesterday all the activity sure enough attracted a magnificent bald eagle, which came to rest on a tree at the edge of our property, and that was special enough. And then all of a sudden, its mate, it's a nesting pair, the other eagle came, and together, whoosh, they flew out of the tree and across the lake. And I was saying to myself, they're so free because they just soared free, and maybe I understood why that was chosen by our forefathers, as the national symbol. It's proud, it's fierce, but when you see up close a bald eagle flying, and they have a huge wingspan, you understand or got a sense of freedom as well. And that's the theme of our next prayer. It's an Exodus prayer, which our ancestors sang at their time of freedom, Mi Chamocha, page 40. Mi Chamocha me'edan b'kodesh, Nora tehilot rosei feleh, Nora tehilot rosei feleh.
מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקר היום לפני משה ומרים, הזלי ענו ואמרו, הזלי ענו ואמרו,
אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
ונאמר כבוד אדוני יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Page 42, grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed, spread over us the shelter of your peace.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום ועמיתנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום ועמיתנו שומרנו לחיים. When I lay down at night, when I rest my head, O God, watch over me. And when the morning comes, we thank the Holy One and pray for peace. One day,
One day,
one day,
one day, one day, one day, one day.
Keep it going.
One day, one day, one day. One day, one day, one day.
Keep it going.
One day, one day, one day. One day, one day, one day.
השכיבנו אדוני
Eloheinu
לשלום והעמיתנו שומרנו לחיים. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
Page 44, the people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת
לדורותם ברית עולם.
כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת,
לעשות את השבת
לדורותם
ברית עולם.
וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת,
לעשות את השבת
לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
The Tefillah prayer links our faith with the faith of our ancestors. Page 46. Please rise.
Adonai sipatai tivtach uvia itzilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasedei Avot V'Imahot, U'Mevii Geula Libnei Bneihem, Leman Shemo Ve'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Bezrat Zara. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mekayeh HaKol Atah Rab Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Brit HaGashem, Mekalkel Chaim Bekesed, Mekayeh HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somek Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayem Emunato, Ishenei Ahar, Mikamocha Bar Gevurot, U'Mino Melach, Melech Menit U'Mekayem, U'Matzmiach Yeshua, B'Ne'eman Atah L'Chayot HaKol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekayeh HaKol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kedoshi b'kol yom yalelu kasera. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated. Let's read together on the top of page 59. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, lecha na'eh lehodot. Our final word of thanks in the Amidah is for the great peace of Shalom Rav, page 60.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon, lekol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon, lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'kol ed ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
Now at the end of the Amidah, our thoughts turn to those of our loved ones in need of healing, be this a healing of body or soul. As I walk around, if you would like to name a loved one for the healing prayer this evening in either Hebrew or English, please do so.
Marion Bolt, Victoria Kramer, John LaRocca. Keep your look going.
Susan Farber.
Howard Peter and Ruth Freeman. And Anthony.
To those names, we of course add, as we have every Shabbat since October 7th, those who remain hostage and those serving in the IDF. Mishaberach avotenu v'imotenu hu yishlach bimhera rifua shlema rifuat nefesh v'rifuat haguf v'nomar amen.
Amen.
Source of strength. bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. And let us say,
Starting this week, the Torah readings really shift rather dramatically from the story of the Exodus to the minute description of the building of the tabernacle, the forerunner of the temple, the forerunner of the synagogue. It's almost as if a different writer takes over. That's exactly what the academics say as one explanation. But this week in the parasha called Truma, the portion that we could translate as offering or contribution, the striking expression in the beginning is you should take a contribution, a donation, an offering from every heart, every person whose heart is willing. Kol nadiv libo. And that root in modern Hebrew actually means mitnadev, volunteer. The person who volunteers has a willing heart. And so we probably should have called volunteer Shabbat last week Shabbat mitnadev or mitnadvim, because that's how you say it in modern Hebrew. We also get a name, a personal name from that root. That name is Nadav. It means a freely given offering. It means a gift, something like that. And Nadav is the name of our firstborn son. He truly was a gift. And tomorrow morning, one of the gifts that he has given to us and the family is our second grandchild, our granddaughter, who will be named tomorrow at Central Synagogue in Manhattan, where 40 years ago, 40, I was the student rabbi, and Nadav's naming was in the exact same place. It's going to be in the same room where Ava, our granddaughter, is going to be named tomorrow. So that's quite a gift from Nadav, whose name means just that. So we pause now for our moment of silent reflection, thinking about what moves our heart to offer a gift to somebody else.
Oh, say shalom יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. 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 יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
On President's Day weekend, I really do try to think about the legacy of our presidents, and particularly perhaps the two greatest, Washington and Lincoln. Well, I came across a powerful story. 200 years ago this year, actually this summer, there was a reunion that took place in the summer of 1824 in Baltimore, Maryland. And someone who had fought in the Revolutionary War and was a hero, but was not an American, came back across the sea for the first time in the nearly 50 years since the Revolutionary War to be part of this reunion. You might have heard of him. His name was the Marquis de Lafayette. And I was astounded to read, do you know how old he was when he became a major general in the Continental Army and helped in the famous Battle of Yorktown to finally win the war? 19 years old. He was 19 years old and became one of George Washington's closest confidants. By the way, I was so startled by that I wanted to find out the ages of some of the other heroic individuals. And one that I wanted to find out in particular was Alexander Hamilton, who was very close to both men and also was a key figure in the Revolutionary War and in the aftermath, the building of the country. You know how old he was?
Young.
19. The Marquis de Lafayette and Alexander Hamilton in 1776, the beginning of the Revolutionary War, were both 19 years old. When I think about 19-year-old boys today, whoa.
A different kind of revolution.
So now he was 67 years old, coming back to now the United States for the first time. They went to Fort McHenry in Baltimore, and there was a reunion of high-ranking soldiers who had fought in the war. And they came specifically to that spot because there was something very special that had been brought to that location. They went inside, they had the reunion, and the Secretary of State, who happened to be there, who would soon become president himself, John Quincy Adams, wrote that the Marquis de Lafayette and everybody started crying, tears of glory, gratitude, and joy. What were they standing in and celebrating? They were standing in the tent of George Washington, which had been brought to that spot for the occasion. Now, have any of you been down to the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia? It's a relatively newer museum that only opened up maybe 10 years ago. When you go in there, what's the first thing that you do? You sit in an auditorium, you listen to a very moving account about Washington, then the curtains part, and there it is, right in front of you. I urge you, if you haven't had this experience, as the director of the museum said, everybody has tears in their eyes after that. I did. I felt all choked up myself as well. For many years, the tent, or at least what survived of it, was in Valley Forge, where Washington spent such a memorable time, and particularly harsh winter. And then when the museum opened up, they transferred the tent, and it became the centerpiece of that very fine museum. For the 200th anniversary, they have a special exhibit, evidently, of Washington's tent and the full history, and they scoured the country for remnants of the tent to make it as complete as possible, because evidently George Washington's step-grandson began snipping pieces of the tent and selling it to people for a profit. I guess that too is the part of the American story. But they've been able to recover many, many fragments, and it's virtually complete. Now, this is a high-ranking officer's tent. It has red scalloped edges. It's shaped like a long oval when pitched. It's typical 18th century. Its dimensions are approximately 23 feet long, 14 feet wide, 12 feet high, which is not that big. And the director of the museum said that compared to the tents of generals and political leaders in Europe, much smaller, much more modest. George Washington insisted in sleeping and working in his tent, placed in the middle of the encampment of the Continental Army throughout the entire 7 years of the Revolutionary War. In many places, he could have slept as a guest in mansions and the like, but day after day, month after month, he occupied this tent. There's a beautiful article about this in Smithsonian Magazine, and the author writes, by electing to camp among his men and endure their hardships for the almost 7-year duration of the war, Washington was doing something highly unusual and calculated for effect. He was consciously trying to model what leadership of the army in a republic would look like. It was customary for military leaders to use buildings as their headquarters, and Washington attracted widespread attention for staying in his tent. He continues, it also served as his sleeping quarters and office. Could you imagine every single day in a tent like that, where he would be seen by fellow soldiers, sitting alone, reading at night by candlelight and writing so many of his famous letters. Some soldiers later recalled remembering how his glowing tent was the last thing they saw at night and the first thing they saw in the morning. Sounds like the tent that traveled with the Israelites as well, the Mishkan tent of meeting as well. Just a few other things about this story, but this is a testament to Washington. It became a family heirloom, and you already heard what his step-grandson did. Well, guess who acquired the tent decades later by marrying Martha Washington's great-granddaughter, Mary Custis. Custis. None other than Robert E. Lee.
Ooh, that's weird.
So Robert E. Lee became custodian of Washington tent for quite some time. Eventually, the family sold it to a reverend in Norristown, Pennsylvania, to raise money for Confederate war widows. The tent eventually landed properly at Valley Forge and then was brought to the Museum of the American Revolution when it opened. George Washington, in sleeping and working from his tent, and in his famous decision to decline another term of office, modeled the humility that is so rare in public life today. Ironic that I'm telling this story on the day that a former president had a $350 million judgment plus interest leveled against him. But the Torah, in seeking out the quality that made Moses a great leader, says Moses was the most humble of servants. It uses that word in particular as well. And we know, we've spoken about how the Torah said no one is above the law. And even the king of Israel was supposed to have a copy of the Torah by his bedside to read and pay attention to it all the days of his life. Now, Washington did not have a copy of the Constitution by his side during the Revolutionary War because the Constitution had not been written yet. But if it had, I am sure he would have done that because that was the type of great leader that he was. I'd prefer to think that the ideals of the Constitution were written on his heart and his soul. On this President's Day weekend, we give tribute to our first president and to those leaders who show us the best in themselves and the best in ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Here's a picture of the tent. For the Aleinu prayer now, for the concluding segment of our service, we turn to the bottom of page 282. And as we open up our tent, our ark, please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גילולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוצר הארץ, ומושל יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, ואלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אף בזולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, בידעת היום בהשבותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד, ונהר
On this Shabbat, we now call to mind in love and reverence the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Samuel Boimel, brother of Fanny Fishbein, Mosek Laser Rosenzweig, father of Betty Rosenzweig, Iris Lehman, sister of Linda Kowalski, Connie Roberg, wife of Kurt Roberg, Rudy Schwartz, husband of Barbara Schwartz, my father. For all those close to our hearts, for all those for whom there may be no one to say Kaddish, we join in the Kaddish prayer on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chay t'chol beit Yisrael, ba'gala uv'zman kariv v'yamru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mivorach leolam olamei almaya. Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata ta'amiran be'alma v'yimru Amen. Shlama Rabba min Shemayim v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Say shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom inu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. Amen. Please be seated. We welcome our president back from Florida for some announcements.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I didn't bring back any oranges, but so be it. Rabbi, did you know that Lafayette and his forces camped right here during the Revolutionary War and probably walked on this property?
Wow.
There's a sign on Fort Lee Road to that effect, small sign. So Lafayette had Leonia roots. Thank you, student Cantor Flaxman. Beautiful music as always. We really appreciate when you're here and are able to conduct our services. Thank you so much. Both Torah study and religious school are on hiatus this weekend. I thought I might mention this. This eternal light came from our original building in Hoboken. It wasn't original in the building, but it came. And today, the rabbi and I performed a miracle with respect to this light. It had gone off.
Oh, you don't want that.
Briefly. And we were able, using our Jewish minds, to actually restore it, and it without touching it. It was amazing. The Emuno book club is reading Leaving Eastern Parkway by Matthew Daub, and the book club is meeting on Monday, March 11th via Zoom. And the book concerns a 15-year-old Hasidic boy whose life is upended when his parents die in an accident. The book is a quick read and is engaging. The discussion will be lively, I'm sure. Our Social Action Committee, led by Annette DeMarco, recently concluded a very successful Super Bowl drive, having collected a significant amount of non-perishable soups. And our food drive now turns to the collection of hot cereals, canned fruits and vegetables, plus any other non-perishable food items. We're still collecting diapers, sizes 4, 5, and 6 as well. Food items will be donated to the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey, and blue bags are available in the social hall for this purpose. And please leave full bags either in the vestry room in the back or on the school porch. Mark your calendars for an exciting Emuno art show featuring many of our talented artists. This fundraiser will be held on April 7th at the historic and beautiful Leonia home of Bill Ziegler and Sue Boyd. It's very possible that Lafayette saw that home.
Yes, it predates in the origin the American Revolution. Yes.
And he was going right down Fort Lee Road, and he would have seen that home. There'll be a silent auction with bidding on the amazing artwork of our artists. Tonight's Zone Egg is sponsored by Barbara Schwartz. And thank you, Dylan, for live streaming tonight's service. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And speaking of colonial times, if you come to the show and fundraiser at Bill and Sue Boyd's home, Bill is the new mayor of Leonia. On the wall of their studio are a double portrait of two relatives that date back to colonial times. They were important colonialists in Philadelphia, and Sue can trace her line all the way back to pre-Revolutionary War times and now lives in a historic home here in Leonia, the single oldest home in our community. If you're watching tonight, that's a shout out for that event. Our Shabbat service will conclude with a rendition of Adon Olam, a very popular Shabbat melody on page 321. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.